The definition of sexual harassment is very weak, right? To one person, it could be one thing. To another person, it could be something that is very normal and within the context of what they're doing. And when you're looking at this movie, they're filming a movie about domestic violence and about, sex and two parties that are fighting and loving each other in the same moment. Those lines are going to be different than when you're in a regular office building.
Welcome back to I Just Have to Say with Laura Max. I am here with attorney Taly Thiessen to talk all about the one thing none of us have stopped reading about or talking about since it all started unfolding, I think around Christmas Eve, the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni legal drama. Taly, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you on.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Well, I knew I had to have an attorney come on the show. It was actually recommended to me by somebody who follows me on Instagram. I asked my followers a question. I said, should I have somebody on to talk about this podcast? Somebody requested that it be an attorney. And I was like, okay, that's brilliant, because I think a lot of this is unfolding and creating a lot of confusion for people from a legal perspective. And of course, just because the situation itself is very, very confusing. I don't think we often see people vacillating and switching sides so frequently as they get new information. But just to recap for everyone, and then I'm going to start asking Taly all of our questions. If you don't know anything about this drama, let me start from the beginning. Colleen Hoover is a New York Times bestselling author. I have talked about her countless times on this show. I've read all of her books, and I even have an episode where I sort of dissect each one and tell you what my favorites are. It Ends With Us is her best-selling novel. It goes back and forth with Verity, another favorite of hers, which will also be turned into a movie. It Ends With Us was written in 2016. And upon being published and shared with the masses via TikTok, it went absolutely viral. And the rights to the movie were purchased by Justin Baldoni and his studio, Wayfarer Studios, long before Blake Lively had anything to do with the project. Blake Lively comes on board. All of Colleen Hoover's super fans, myself very much included, are insanely excited about the fact that this movie is going to be in theaters at some point. And once we see the whole cast on the red carpet, as the movie is premiering, Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively are not seen together. They are in different sections. They are not photographed together. The entire cast is being photographed with Blake. Justin is with his wife, who does make a cameo in the film, but she's certainly not a cast member by any stretch. And people speculate. Then it becomes clear that nobody in the cast is following him on Instagram. Some people have even blocked him on Instagram. So what's going on? And I will tell you, as a super fan of this book and this movie, I know a lot of people shared this initial reaction. I saw the movie. I thought it was amazing. And I felt terribly for this man who was being totally excluded by this whole cast. And I couldn't understand why that would be happening. Before you know it, Justin Baldoni hires Johnny Depp's publicist. So if you haven't watched Depp versus Heard on Netflix, you wouldn't know that Johnny Depp had an incredible publicist who made everyone, who was capable of essentially making everybody on his side via social media, whether you would have been or not from watching the case. Everything from pushing TikTok clips that were in his favor, curating information about the case to make people really take his side. And Justin Baldoni hires this publicist. So I'm watching this and immediately thinking, well, of course you've done something wrong. Why are you hiring Johnny Depp's publicist? I guess that wasn't the public's reaction, but right as he hires this publicist, my entire Instagram Discover Me feed is article after article about Blake Lively and how terrible Blake Lively is. Now, if you are a female millennial, you know that Blake Lively is one of the most untarnished celebrities we have. She's married. She has 4 wonderful children. She's had an incredible career. Some would use the word unproblematic to describe her. Really nothing, no on her reputation. So to all of a sudden see this just barrage of this 2016 interview that she did, which was really unflattering, a bunch of other clips from her press tour for It Ends With Us coming out one after the next. The comments about Blake Lively, I'm watching on thinking, wow, how have we all turned on her so fast? How is this happening? Well, most celebrities would probably respond at this point, but get nothing from Blake Lively for months. Finally, right around Christmas Eve, she files a complaint, which we're going to talk to Taly about, a request to sue the state of California, pages and pages of evidence against Justin Baldoni, claiming sexual harassment. I know I read this while I was traveling with my kids and I'm drooling. I never said anything publicly about Blake Lively being a terrible person. I've never thought that she was a terrible person, but I'm reading it and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the public has wronged her so severely. And I think a lot of people who were even quote unquote Team Justin felt that way after reading this article. Of course, only a few days later, Justin comes back. He countersues, but not exactly. He sues the New York Times for $250 million for libel, for taking things out of context. And according to his attorney, he will be suing Blake Lively and a few others as well very shortly. So we will have more information very soon. But as it stands, this is something that has made so many people, myself very much included, vacillate from side to side as they get more information. So I'm so excited to have Taly on the show. Let's start from the beginning, Taly. What did Blake Lively do when she filed this complaint? A lot of people were really confused. There was the complaint, then there was the lawsuit. I think it came across as two different lawsuits. Can you explain the legal process for us and why things happened the way that they did?
Sure. So in California, they have a civil rights department where if you have issues that infringe on your civil rights in different areas, most notably in this case, they're dealing with like employment civil rights issues, then you can file an application through this process, and they actually assign an investigator to your application, and they determine whether or not there is enough information to go forward for a lawsuit, which would end up giving her a right to sue paperwork. But most notably, what I think that this process is typically used for is that if you start this process, a lot of people use it as a way to mediate the case prior to litigation. And in this case, she didn't do that. Like, she requested the right to sue letter and then went ahead and filed the lawsuit. And it didn't look like she actually took advantage of that mediation process. And I think that what Justin was saying in his lawsuit back was that she never actually intended on going through litigation with this process. She just wanted to drop the complaint and kind of start her own smear campaign in retaliation against him. And then I think that she needed to then file the lawsuit once she kind of got caught on that situation. Because what I've heard, when you file a complaint through the Civil Rights Department, it does protect you at least temporarily from some of the discovery process. And so it wouldn't really open her up to a deposition or to questions regarding her behavior.
Well, when I first read it, and I do happen to be married to a lawyer, so I did understand the difference between the complaint and the lawsuit itself, I definitely thought maybe this is just a complaint. Maybe she's not actually going to go forward with it. What a mess that would be. And if you look at the commentary online prior to him retaliating, one person called it a masterclass in PR that she has filed this lawsuit. And I'm thinking, I wonder though, because if he is going to respond, which he has, why does he have all this confidence in responding? And so we've now all seen this lawsuit where he claims that the Times took his messages and things that he said out of context. And I'm reading it, and I have a friend who's an attorney who read it who thought that he just looked like he was grasping for straws. I didn't feel that way at all reading it. And I'm so curious to know what you thought. He has one of the claims against him is that he walked into her dressing room while she was breastfeeding. And we've got a text of hers inviting him into her dressing room while she is pumping, which I am a woman who has breastfed and pumped for 3 children. Like, I would not let a man anywhere near me when I had a pump attached to me, which is totally her choice, right? But the fact that there's an invitation towards him to come into her trailer, there are a lot of like relatively damning messages in his lawsuit. What did you think about his lawsuit?
I completely agree. I think that the basis of her lawsuit, right? It's 2 different things that she claimed in her lawsuit. First, that there was sexual harassment. And then second, he orchestrated a smear campaign against her, right? And so when he responded, I think he kind of cut the legs out from some of her sexual harassment claims, just showing some of her very own text messages. And they've already said that they're going to release all of the communication with Blake Lively. So I think that there's going to be more to come. Now, understanding the fact that you have 1 or 2 exceptions to a list of 17 or 30 different scenarios that maybe Blake Lively had doesn't mean there isn't sexual harassment that went on the set. Like, it doesn't clear him from every situation. But I think what he was trying to show in his response was that he kind of set his tone after her tone. And so that, I think, does hurt her. And I think that when you're talking about sexual harassment, it's the same issue that we have when you're dealing with, 2 very high-powered Hollywood executives, 2 very high-powered Hollywood actors, or you're just talking about people in an office building. Like the definition of sexual harassment is very weak, right? To one person, it could be one thing. To another person, it could be something that is very normal and within the context of what they're doing. And when you're looking at this movie, they're filming a movie about domestic violence and about, sex and two parties that are fighting and loving each other in the same moment. Those lines are going to be different than when you're in a regular office building.
So here are some things that strike me because I agree with what you're saying. And then I look at the data and I look at what everyone in this cast has done and I pull back a little bit more. So first of all, you are totally right that her complaint was about a smear campaign and sexual harassment. And I really do feel like he took the focus off of the smear campaign and focused more on the sexual harassment. It also does seem like she really did set the tone in a lot of these texts. She was by far the bigger celebrity. She's much wealthier. She's married to a billionaire. She was way more powerful in this situation, and their text reflected that dynamic. She used the word sexy to talk about her clothing, and he sort of describes jumping on that bandwagon. Okay, you're going to use this word. She signs off one of her texts with an X, like short for XOXO. And I was talking to a friend of mine like that. And I said, would you ever sign off that way with a male colleague, like for any reason? She said, absolutely not. And so I think she set this tone and he's going to follow it. He is nowhere near the star power that she has. But then I zoom out, Taly, and it's like, no one in the cast will talk to him. Colleen Hoover had her book turned into a movie because of him. I mean, she was catapulted into more fame than she ever had previously because of this one man. And she doesn't want anything to do with him. She's also stopped commenting on this case. She said one thing, she came out in support of Blake Lively. Now she's no longer commenting. And the speculation is that because she's going to be called to make a comment or to speak about this case in court. And no one, where are the people from Jane the Virgin? Where are his castmates? Have you heard anybody say anything in support of him at all? Like anyone?
Not that I can think of. Obviously, we have the text messages from editors and different people that he's worked with that obviously appear to be on his side in this situation and are definitely seeming to put forth the perception that Blake was kind of hard to deal with in this movie. Just reading those text messages, it is very problematic that the cast is clearly Team Blake for him, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very problematic that Colleen Hoover is very Team Blake. However, I want to know if that decision is based on things that happened on the set from Justin and Blake or things that Hollywood, we all know what Hollywood is. Hollywood is a situation of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I'm going to help you do different things. Who has the bigger star power here? I don't see a lot of this cast coming out and saying that Justin did anything on set. They're just removing themselves from the situation. They're blocking him. They're not appearing in the same situations, but they're not coming out and saying, like, he sexually harassed me too. He did these things that were problematic on set. And so I wonder if this is a star power situation and that we have hitched our wagon to the two people that we believe can get us further in Hollywood. And this guy's not going to survive very much longer. Right. So I'm interested to see what that dynamic is, but I do think that's probably the overreaching question in the back of everybody's minds when you look at these two lawsuits. You're like, but why do people not seem to be on his side?
Yeah, it's so bizarre because he's honestly the one that I think humanly speaking, you're more sympathetic with because it's like he was the smaller, he was the lesser celebrity. He created this movie, which, by the way, whether or not you like Colleen Hoover, you cannot deny that the production of this movie is incredible. He produced this movie. He sort of seems like he's being bullied. Like she seems like a mean girl. She does come off that way. There's a whole article talking about like why were we all so quick to hate her. And like she had this sort of, it didn't come off well. Like I've loved her my whole life. Like I've always been a Blake Lively fan. I watched Gossip Girl, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. And I'm watching this whole thing unfold and I'm like, why is she being, I mean, it's clear that everybody's following her. But to counter that, Brendan Skenlar, who played Atlas, when the article came out about her filing the complaint, he shared it in all caps and said, like, for the love of God, please read this. And it was like, I felt like he was saying, I witnessed this. I saw this. She also references younger female co-stars in her complaint, complaining about him. And when I was reading that, I was like, oh God, I've been there. Like, I feel like every woman who's ever been in a workplace has been there where there's some guy and he's inappropriate. And she mentions in the complaint that him and Mr. Heath like are hugging each other all the time, hugging the castmates all the time and making them physically uncomfortable. And at one point, I guess Justin Baldoni was in a kissing scene with her and they were no longer supposed to be kissing. And like he puts his lips on her neck and he says, you smell really good. And then she came to this all hands on deck meeting and said, there's no more improvised kissing, no more like discussing this with me. But it's very easy to read a lot of what she said in the light of she was a lot more powerful than he was. And she shot like, it's so difficult, I think, from these two very, very, very different perspectives to get what the truth is, which is why I really do. I mean, I imagine it's somewhere in the middle. Do you think the same thing? Do you think the truth is somewhere in the middle, or do you think there's clearly somebody here who is in the wrong?
No, I think like any lawsuit, nobody wants to be the villain in their own story, right? So I definitely think that there's missteps that were taken and things that happened in this case. And then I think that there were additional missteps that were taken by hiring crisis PR, by doing these spins. And then again, like, I think the funniest thing with this like Lively lawsuit is she's accusing him of creating a smear campaign. But come on, the Times article coming out the same day the complaint dropped with the leaked complaint, with fully researched, and we've read thousands and thousands of emails. Who did that? Like,
yeah.
That is an absolute smear campaign in retaliation of his smear campaign. And the fact that everybody keeps saying like, oh my God, I'm totally on Blake's side. And then the moment they read his, they're like switching right back and forth. Then that totally tells me that the Times did not present an accurate or fair representation of both sides. If they did the background that they should have done, it should not have been verbatim Blake's lawsuit. And that's just showing you that they use PR on their side to kind of go back at him. So I think that we're trying to recover our personal goodwill and we're just kind of keeping being a problem, right? Justin put himself on this feminist ally pedestal, and then you hire Johnny Depp's publicist. You hire an attorney with his own history of sexual harassment issues. And then you're trying to tell a woman that what you perceive as sexual harassment wasn't sexual harassment. Like, you either did it to yourself or you welcomed it. Ugh, that's problematic, dude.
Yeah, really problematic. And I'm a huge Bill Maher fan, and he does this skit every Friday when he has his show, and he says like, I don't know it for sure, but I just know it's true. And I did a podcast with my friend David Peck, and I'm like, I didn't know it for sure, but I know it's true that real male feminists do not go and like on a TED Talk circuit and write books about being feminists. Like, there is a huge red flag for me. And this was a long time ago. This was before I feel like he hired the publicist. I said, there is something here that smells so bad to me about the fact that he is like pushing this narrative about himself, like very aggressively, like not as a defensive, as an offensive. Like, it's very rare to see somebody do that. And I'm like, I use my husband as, I'm like, my husband loves women. He supports women. You're not going to see him on a podcast talking about empowering women or giving a speech about it. Like, he's probably going to let the women do that. I mean, he's not going to take this on. He's not going to cry while he's making a movie. Even the things that he said about making the movie about domestic violence it read as very insincere to me. And I was thinking all that before any of this started. But then all these videos come out about Blake, and you also watch her with her husband, Ryan Reynolds, which in the beginning I really related to. Like, if somebody was harassing me, I would be like, yeah, I'd bring in my husband and I would probably want to deal with it with my husband. But it doesn't read very well that Ryan Reynolds allegedly totally berated Justin Baldoni and how powerful they are together. I know that they didn't go to the Golden Globes together last night, Blake and Ryan. It's just very interesting to me to watch these dynamics play out and to see how quickly our perception of people can change based off of what we read about, which brings me to my next point. So what I find so interesting is that people feel like they need to pick a side and that they're so sure of the side that they're on. And I think the fact that smear campaigns can be created in our culture and the fact that people can be canceled as quickly as they are without any investigation into the truth. So Justin was dropped by WME, his talent agency. His podcast host quit like 4 hours later, which seems to me like it's probably more personal. I mean, I'm like, do you know that he's like this? Like, how could you decide to do that so quickly? Right. But what do you make of the way that we are so desperate? I mean, I feel like we're really desperate for finality and for a black and white answer, but we also really want somebody to be bad. And our society really pushes that and somebody to be really good. And when you look at this case, Taly, it is so obvious, no matter what ends up happening, that like there was bad behavior across the board here. There was more on one side than the other. And I don't know what side that is yet, but it is not a black and white issue.
No, I don't think it's a black and white issue at all, but I do think it points to our need to kind of jump on negativity. And especially because when you read Justin Baldoni's response, I think his team is shocked at how quickly the public distrust of blank came out, right?
Yes.
They're saying like, that wasn't me. Like, I wish I could claim that I planted that story. I wish that I could claim that I got everybody to turn over. And they even say, this is just how much people want to hate on a woman. And honestly, it's 100% true. I mean, look at what happened at our election. Right?
Yeah.
People decided they didn't want to vote for Kamala just because she's a woman, right? It happens across all areas. It happens in the law. It happens on our juries. It happens in the public eye. And so I don't think Justin Baldoni did right. I don't think Blakely did right. But I think that people were so excited to jump on somebody that high powered doing a little bit of wrong. And especially because her and Ryan have kind of enjoyed this happy, funny, go lucky Taylor Swift, like great, like you said, not problematic history. They love to take somebody down that has a not problematic history, right?
Yes.
And a lot of it was her own doing. A lot of it, she's not a great interviewer.
Well, let's talk about that. Okay. So initially, I didn't watch a lot of those interviews when all this was happening, but I'm like feeling really badly for her just hearing about them. I'm like, I really don't think she intentionally like decided to go on this crusade promoting flowers and getting dressed up with your girlfriends as it pertains to a domestic violence film. I think that sort of ended up happening. And I feel really, and then I'm watching interviews with this new perspective. There's this one where the interviewer asked her a very bizarre question just right off. I thought the question was really strange, but he said, you know, if anybody wants to get in touch with you or if anybody wants to reach out to you because they're in a domestic violence situation, what can they do? The question itself I thought was very bizarre, but then she responds with like, what do you want me to send you? Like my location or like my phone number? And it was just came off as being, you've seen it. It came off just really bad.
It was maybe not the best question, but it was a terrible answer.
Terrible. Right? Yeah. And it was so like, I've never dealt with anything like this. Like anyone who does deal with things like this, they're way beneath me. That was how it came off.
Yeah. And like, don't come to me with your problems. Like that's not what I'm for.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I like the whole funny her and Ryan haha back and forth. I don't think that's Blake at all. I think that Ryan and his team is completely in charge of all of that. I don't think that she's that funny. I don't think she's that quick-witted. I just don't think she's that person. And I think they've done a good job of insulating her and keeping her at home and like Ryan kind of being the person that's out and about because I don't think she's that great on camera or being asked questions. She's a little tone deaf. I don't think she has the background to kind of have the real world experience to answer questions regarding some of these issues. I mean, I think in the past, she's also said that she never had a problem with Harvey Weinstein and thought he was great. And it's like things like that it's like, ugh, like somebody be like giving you some point, you know? And I understand that this is the way they decided to market this film, but what Baldoni said was that she had a hand in that marketing plan with Sony. And it wasn't really agreed to by everybody. It was just kind of like, this is my plan and this is how I want to market it. And so it wasn't even really, I understand that they're saying like he went off script and he wasn't supposed to plan it or market it like that. But the marketing plan wasn't specific. It was just kind of like, touch on these things and maybe not so much on this.
Before we continue with this episode of I Just Have to Say with Laura Max, this episode is brought to you by Styled by ALV. Styled by ALV brings you custom merchandise, styled events, and tablescapes here in Aspen, Colorado. From bridal and baby showers to corporate events, Styled by ALV specializes in branding and personalizing your celebration or gathering and making it an occasion to remember. If you want your friends and family to attend your Aspen gathering and never forget it because they brought home a piece of merch that they use all the time. I'm talking water bottles, hats, koozies, shirts, sweatshirts, cups, hats, you name it. Styled by ALV has it, and they're going to make it something your guests actually want to use and actually wear. They'll create a logo for your event. They'll come up with tablescapes that make your party absolutely gorgeous. You do not want to plan an event in Aspen, Colorado without Styled by ALV. If you want to work with them on your next event, you can head on over to Instagram, follow them at Styled by ALV, or visit their website, styledbyalv.com, and you can use the contact form to get in touch with them. Styled by ALV is your go-to resource for all things party planning in Aspen, Colorado. Yeah, I mean, I sort of think that, I mean, as that was all unfolding, right? I remember I read the book in like 2020, I think. And I didn't really remember that Lily had a flower shop. I didn't remember those types of details. I just remembered the story. And then as she's making it all about flowers and all this stuff, I'm like, oh, and that's kind of funny. Like, cool, good for you. Like she's getting all dressed up. I'm not really thinking about it that way. But then as she starts to sort of, I see these two, and it's exactly what we're seeing in the case. I see these two polar opposite sides coming up. We've got Justin over here with this like way over empathetic, what came off to me as being so disingenuous, but obviously I'm in the minority. I mean, people were obsessed with him. People were like, oh my gosh, you are our savior. Thank you for doing this. It seemed so disingenuous to me, just so over the top, like really appealing to victims of domestic violence. And then you've got her talking about flowers and like getting dressed up and going with your girlfriends. And I think she talked about really like Lily was so much quote unquote more than a survivor of domestic violence, and that she had all these different parts of her personality, and Blake really wanted to push those forward. It seemed to me when she was saying all that, though, Taly, that she just really, really didn't like that there was any type of domestic violence that this character experienced. She did not want to be associated with it. She looked down on it. And her answers reflected that. It really did not serve her. I mean, it really, like, there are a lot of people saying that, yes, I mean, maybe he launched a smear campaign, but even the people who launched it are talking about the fact that it took off without them really needing to do that much about it. Like, these videos were there.
Yeah, they're getting a lot of credit. And especially this woman who just opened her business and is like the best spin PR campaign person in the country. Honestly, I'm concerned that Blake Lively didn't even read the book. Right? I don't think the way she played Lily, I don't think she dressed like Lily in the book. I don't think she acted like Lily in the book. I don't think she had the money. Lily didn't have the money in the book that she portrayed that she had on film. I mean, there were so many changes, I felt like, from the book to the movie, which is one of the issues that I think that maybe that's the reason that Colleen Hoover is on Blake's side, is that maybe Colleen Hoover likes this cut of the book because it is based on Colleen Hoover's own experience with her mom. And maybe she would rather see it in this way other than the way that it was portrayed in the book. But I didn't like the movie. I was like, where did this come from? Like, we're missing
you didn't like, okay, I want to talk to you about this because I've seen the movie 5 times. So you didn't like the movie.
I did not like the movie. No.
Okay. And that is because Lily was a totally disingenuous Lily. And what else?
I do think that it was disingenuous. And I don't think that the relationship between Lily and Atlas was really solidified where you were really pulling for that situation. Nor did you feel in the book, you hated Ryle, but you loved him at the same time because you could feel that he wanted to be better for himself, but that he honestly could not change the way he was. And there was just none of that in the movie, I felt like. It just, the character development wasn't there where you didn't root for anyone. At the end of the day, probably the only person you rooted for was Lily's friend, who just had literally everything in life that she could have ever wanted and was just killing it in life. That's the only person anybody actually great. And, her and her husband were great. But as far as like the main characters, it just fell flat, I feel like. And it became more about the weird fashion choices and the weird music. And I don't think she hit that. I think if she was trying to take creative control and like make this her baby and say, this is what I can do, I think people should be very scared in Hollywood about letting her have that creative control, because I was like, what are you wearing? Like that makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, he talks about, I mean, it's in her complaint that he was very concerned with the outfits that she was choosing. And I remember when all the paparazzi were taking pictures of her and everybody was like, oh my God, what is she wearing? And I guess he was very concerned about this and he confronted her about it. And she came into it with like a very specific, spin that she wanted to add. I will say, and this is something I heard people talking about in the bathroom as I was exiting the movie, I don't know how many times I saw it in theaters, 2 or 3. I don't remember. But as I was obsessed, Taly. As I was walking out, what'd you say?
I said, apparently
apparently. Well, I'll tell you why I was obsessed in a second. But I was obsessed while also very much acknowledging what I heard being discussed in movie theater bathrooms, which was that the love story between Lily and Atlas was one of my favorite love stories that Colleen Hoover's ever written. It was visceral. Like there were few love stories like it in literature and in life. And their connection was incredible. And it lasted through however long they were separated for. And I mean, this movie doesn't capture that, like even like a percentage of it. Their connection when they're younger, like they seem like they're friends a little bit. They have like a really nice friendship. Then when they reconnect when they're older, they don't really have any chemistry. There's this one moment at the end of the movie. So if you haven't watched it, don't listen to this next minute, but it's the last line of the movie. And she asks him if he's in a relationship and he says, no, not yet. And he sort of looks at her in this way that like very like minorly reflects some of the connection that they had in the book, but it is not even close. So I will absolutely say that. I also thought, and this is something, if I had a larger platform or was perhaps more famous, I might be terrified to say, but I'm going to say it right now. She did not present as a victim of as somebody who would get into a relationship with somebody who abused her like that. She came off as immensely confident, as like totally unbreakable. And then she would have these scenes with this person and it just did not fit. And I am very aware as I say this, that anybody can get into a relationship with somebody like that. It is not, nobody is immune. And I want to underscore that. Like nobody is immune to getting into a relationship with an abuser. But I don't think, first of all, there were so many pieces of their dynamic that would not have actually existed in reality. Like she was immensely confident as this was going on. I think she would have exited way more quickly if she even let this relationship get to that point. What do you think about all that?
I would agree. Like she appears in the movie as she probably appeared in production, which was, the boss, right?
Yeah. She's like the boss. And then she's getting like beat the shit out of and thrown down a staircase. And she's like, wakes up and she has to know what just happened. And she's like, am I okay? And it's like, what? Like, yeah, you run shit. What are you talking about?
I completely agree with you. Like in any situation, there can be domestic violence in a million different ways, right?
Yes.
But when you're posting it for the masses, you're kind of giving something that everybody can attach to and everybody can say like, yeah, that is a scenario where this could happen.
Yeah.
And you're right. It doesn't feel authentic in this situation. It doesn't feel authentic in the movie. That's why the movie fell flat for me. And I felt like the book was so much better. But that's also why I am confused about the Colleen Hoover situation, because I feel like what she wrote and what she received from Blake Lively's edit, I think we can all agree what we're seeing is Blake Lively's edit of the movie seems to be completely different. And so for her to support that, either she supports Blake Lively, and we also have to understand that there's a sequel in the air somewhere with this, which comes to be part of this whole development. But then, or was just the behavior so bad on set that Colleen just can't get behind Justin?
Yeah, I think it's not about the book. I think Colleen's support of Blake has to do with who Blake is. And she talks about that. And I do believe, and even the head of Sony has come out in favor of Blake, which I don't really think he needs to like protect himself with her Hollywood clout, right? There's another person who said like we would work with Blake 12 more times if we could. Like everyone who's worked with her, for the most part, has shared really amazing experiences working with her. I think she is dynamic and magnetic. I think she makes people feel good about themselves. Like I get that from her, that she's like that type of friend, and she's really big and special and important. And I think she has a way of probably making other people feel the same way. This is what I imagine. And I don't think anybody was about to push back on her vision for this film. I think it was, and the reason why I did like it is because I hadn't read the book in a really long time. And I think it was her own, and really not his, which says a lot, but I think it was like her own movie. It was like it wasn't a different story, but I did like certain parts of the story she told. I am literally in the 1% here, but I liked a lot of her outfits, Taly. I really did. Did you hate them all?
I hated them all.
All of them.
All of them. Basically all
Even
of them.
like
I don't understand
what about like
what obsession was in this movie. I don't know if she was like, hey, we are in the upper Midwest, and so it is going to be Carhartt for every scene. I don't get it. And then the Louboutins with the army print. I'm sorry. It's just not my style.
Yeah. What about like the really big, like in the first scene, she's wearing that jean sort of jumper thing, the onesie, when she's on the rooftop? I thought that, I mean, I'm always thinking of things through perspective of like having gained and lost a lot of weight multiple times because I've had children. She was very postpartum in this movie. And I'm like, she dressed herself like in a way that really, I mean, I thought she looked great. And I'm reading all of these things that everybody just thinks that these were the worst outfits. And they really mostly thought it when the paparazzi was photographing her outfits. But obviously there was still backlash on the actual movie, but he definitely had a problem with all of this as well. So I will say, after having this conversation, here's what I think, Taly. I think he probably, and I pinned this like a long time ago. I have to keep coming back to that because I'm very proud of myself. I pinned that he was probably pretty slimy to work with. And I hope I'm not wrong in saying that, because I would hate to add to everything that's being said about him. But for somebody who's going on these press tours talking the way that he was, I really did feel like something was up. I think it's very clear that something clearly was up. To what degree, I don't know. I think he probably did things and acted inappropriately at various times. Certainly not the way that we interpreted it from the initial complaint, but definitely to a degree. Then I think he hired somebody to make sure none of that ever got out, because what would have happened to him if this got out? What would have happened to him? So instead of dealing with it in myriad other ways, he got really terrified and hired this insane agency to essentially orchestrate a smear campaign against her. And she retaliated, which was the worst thing that could have happened to him, because she is more powerful than he is. And people do like her more than they like him. So I think what ended up happening was that both of these people, I mean, I've talked to so many people about this, Taly. I'm like, do you feel like either of them are going to come out of this unscathed? Like, unless this goes completely in the direction of one of them, a la Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, this doesn't go well for either of them. My hope would just be like, I really hate the cancellation of people. Like, I hate it. I feel like we lose so much talent all the time, unless you're like really committing heinous crimes. Like, I'm talking Harvey Weinstein. I don't know if what we know about Justin Baldoni warrants him never having another moment to pursue his career again. Like, do you feel like let's say everything Blake Lively said was true. Do you think that he would deserve to be dropped by his agency, to never have anybody work with him again in Hollywood?
No, I don't think so. I think that he was a young actor who started a production company with a millionaire best friend and got in over his head. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think he knew what he was doing. I think that he thought he knew what he was doing, and he got this great book that people seem to like. And then Colleen Hoover blew up. And then they brought on this huge star. And I think he was in over his head dealing with Sony and dealing with Blake Lively. And then a la Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds. Right?
Yeah.
And I think he didn't know what to do. And so he ended up catering to basically all of their whims in the situation. But I think he was probably some bro on a production set who didn't know what he was doing. He was
a pro. He did slimy things too. I don't think anybody should think that that's okay. And I think that what he did wrong, Taly, is that he hired this agency to smear her. Like, I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't. No?
I don't know about that. Because here's the thing. everybody in Hollywood has PR campaigns. Everybody in Hollywood has crisis managers, right? Think about back in like September. Do you remember when everybody saw that thing that came out regarding Taylor Swift and Travis?
Yes.
Like they're going to break out up in September and here's the plan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a crisis plan. That's a crisis management plan. Everybody has them. If you're somebody in Hollywood, you have a crisis plan with 100 different scenarios of what could happen.
Sure.
That's just good business, right? I think the problem with Justin is that he with something we haven't talked about is like obviously the text messages from Stephanie Jones and those that got subpoenaed by a civil subpoena before there was even a lawsuit. That's an issue. But I don't exactly
what were those text messages? Let's discuss those text messages.
Like all the text messages in Blake Lively's lawsuit came from a phone that was in Stephanie Jones' possession that was his prior publicist that ended up leaving and starting her own business. The funny thing about it is they said it came from a civil subpoena, but there wasn't a complaint filed. So again, with your Hollywood scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, I think she was like, hey, send me a subpoena and I'll give you the dump. Right. But there was no legal action that she could have been held under because there was no lawsuit.
Yeah.
It's just like me sending subpoenas to people being like, hey, give me information. And then being like, this isn't even filed in court. Right. And so a lot of the basis came from that. But I think that the New York Times is in trouble because I do think they edited some of those text messages. I do think looking at all the text messages show that, yes, they had a crisis team in place, but I don't think it was pervasive as Blake imagines it to be. I think that it was a lot of her own downfall. I would agree with them on that. And everybody plans stories. I mean, you see Blake Lively's own publicist trying to reach out to the Daily Mail, trying to drop stories about him. It's just business. I think that that's going to happen in both ways.
Even though it's just business, what I'm saying is that let's say this played out and he hadn't hired this company, right? Let's say we were all just speculating about why they wouldn't be photographed together because that was what everybody was talking about. There were also a lot of articles that I think came out before he hired them that were negative about her. I mean,
nobody just lets things speculate, right? Like eventually somebody was going to make the first move. And
you think that she was going to make the first move?
Oh, somebody was going to make the first move because there's all these reporters sending requests for comment.
Sure.
And you think that her publicist and his publicist, they apparently hate each other. The actors hate each other. And we just have the truth that everybody's going to ignore all these requests for comment. No, they're going to go around to the friendly reporters that they have and they're going to drop a little tidbit. They're going to say something, but it's going to come from a source. It's not going to come from their camp. And then that's where it goes. Like you can't help but retaliate against things that you aren't even sure coming from the other side, because it's like, you're not going to be the last one, with your pants down. So,
and from that perspective, it's like she was definitely the one who didn't think she had anything to lose. Like she was less afraid than he was. I mean, he had this mega star who was going to claim sexual harassment against him. And his entire brand was that he was this super feminist, which I detected in his interviews that he was going over the top about that for some reason. And I get the reason now, right? Like, oh my God, these people think that I'm creepy. Like a lot of people on the set, apparently. And I don't think she bit first because I don't think she was in the more vulnerable position, but I don't think that she could have ever anticipated. I couldn't have ever anticipated, people were just ready to jump on her. Like it was like the second this started happening, his publicist was right. Like she didn't really need to do that much. People were like, oh, wait, we hate her. And I will say, you were talking about that being because she was female. Yes, but also it's the women who hate her so much. It's the women.
I'm going to tell you, as a woman attorney, I take the women off my juries first.
Why is that? Why?
They're harder on other women than anybody else.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I dislike women on my juries. And if I have a woman client, I really dislike women, because are they going to hate on me? But they're going to hate on my client too. So women gone. Women notoriously the hardest on other women. And so
it's fascinating because the backlash it was like her backlash was equal. It was an equal and opposite reaction to just how built up she's been. She really, she was way up in the sky in terms of people just loving her. There's a video of her talking about her husband in an awards acceptance speech or presentation, and it's been shared millions and millions of times. And People love the way she dresses. They think she's absolutely gorgeous. They love her movies. Like, I think she just, and I've talked about this with one of my best friends that like I have 3 children. Blake has 4. I have often looked at her and been like, oh, how does she do that? Like, I've compared myself to her. So when she gets pushed down a peg, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I don't have to worry so much anymore because you're not perfect. And I think I'm aware of that, right? I'm not about to go into the comment section and be like, F you, Blake, you're the worst person ever. Make myself feel a lot better. But I don't think that that's the way that our society works. I'm looking at the comment sections and it's like people were just so ready to take her down. They were done feeling badly about themselves, I think, compared to her.
Yeah. And it gets clicks, right? So negativity gets clicks, negativity gets interaction. And that's what people like. And it's a hard part of our society these days. I mean, as far as like how I think this whole thing will resolve, I think that pretty much it'll probably end up going the way of slowly going away in the next year or so, unless it just kind of goes crazy and they actually request a jury trial, which would be crazy. And that would be definitely a feeding frenzy. But I think that he was never some like super A-list Hollywood star anyways, right? Jane the Virgin, his podcast, he'll continue to do the little things that he does. I don't think it's going to hurt him that much. I do think it's going to hurt her a little bit. I think that people are going to see these text messages and see that she's difficult to work with. And I think once a woman is branded difficult to work with in Hollywood, I think it does ding them. So I do think she's going to get the raw end of this deal. And I don't know how much of that could have been helped or hurt by the action she continues to take. But I do think that she'll end up getting more negativity than he will.
Well, let's conclude with what's going to happen next. So you were saying, they might let this go to a jury trial. I think a lot of people are thinking that that's inevitable. Clearly, that's not inevitable. What are the next steps? What happens when people sue each other? I mean, he hasn't even sued her yet, but what can we expect to see moving forward?
I mean, so he requested a jury trial in his complaint against the New York Times. Just because somebody requested, obviously it doesn't happen. We always tell people, jury trials happen in less than 10% of cases, I would say, especially in this kind of case, because so many times these cases are resolved in mediation with settlements that are confidential, that kind of help both parties get a pound of flesh, but then also not get any more issues in the public eye. As far as her complaint goes, I don't think she requested a jury trial, but I believe it'll be done in the same manner. I think there will reach a settlement. I think both parties will reach a settlement. I think the fact that he hasn't sued her yet says something. I think the fact that he's taking some time to do so might say that there's already some things happening behind the scenes about people saying, okay, like this got a little...
This is not good. You think that maybe he might not even sue her because do you think she's going to make a move before then or no?
No, I don't know if make a move, but I think that they're definitely talking. I think that there's probably some issues that neither party saw happening from their lawsuits. And so maybe that will get resolved, or that piece of it will get resolved. But usually they hang around for 8 to 12 months. And then we hear something about an undisclosed settlement or a confidential settlement. If it goes to trial, that's going to be very fun and very interesting. That's going to be the new Gwyneth Paltrow trial that everybody's going to be paying attention to. So that could be very interesting because it's got a lot of high-powered people involved, a lot of high-powered people that are going to have to testify. That will be drama.
That will be drama. If I were either of them, I would just be doing everything I could to avoid that scenario. I just do not see that playing well for either one of them. And agreed. I do see it also ending with the way that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard ended, which is like somebody's wrong and somebody's right. And that is a huge risk. And I would hope that that wouldn't be the way that all this unfolded. But anyway, thank you for indulging my total obsession with this, Taly, and so many others. I really appreciate you. And I'm so glad that you came on today.
I am too. The fact that I learned that you've seen this movie 5 times is what I walk away with the best information that I've heard today.
I can't stop watching. I watched it in light of the fact that they hate each other. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, I have to see it again so I can process everything that just happened. So I saw it again. I don't know why. I think I saw it for a 3rd time at home. I don't know. I don't know. I don't really remember 3 and 4, but 5 was like, wait, now I know. Like they literally loathe each other, and I have to watch this in that light. And one of my best friends does the same thing. She's watched it not as many times as me, but each time we watch it, like with new pieces of information, we couldn't talk about this more. Like I've talked about this for like at least 48 hours of my life. That's a lot of time.
Well, and I think that looking at this and understanding a sequel is up in the air. It's like, how would that be a good idea?
Oh my God. And how is that even going to happen at this
How
point?
is that even possible? How would it be a good idea? Like, just
Ryle is the character that you could maybe make a sequel without, but it would still be lacking because he's very, the second book is very short. Yeah.
He's the parent of this child. So like, it would be terrible. I'm going to be really honest. I didn't love Verity either.
You didn't love Verity? You seem to me like somebody who would love Verity.
No, and I know that they've already started pushing who's going to be in that movie.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Have you read any other books by her?
Yeah, I've read probably like 5 or 6 of her books. I don't really love a Colleen Hoover book. It's kind of like Frida McFadden to me. They're fast reads. They're kind of usually lacking on the development, but they're quick and they're, like easy thrillers that you can, they're beach read. That's what I'll call them.
And I'll say what I like. I haven't read a Colleen Hoover book in like a while now because I read them all like together at once over almost a year ago, all 24 of them, which is insane. But I don't know, like I went and reread It Starts With Us after this movie came out. And I remember being like, oh, like, I think I've just kind of come a little ways in terms of what I want to read. But a lot of people will a lot of people will say that Colleen Hoover was like their introduction into reading. And I think that she's that for me too. Like her stories are all like, whatever you want to say about her writing, which doesn't bother me, but I know bothers some. Her stories are like how I often find myself wondering how she came up with them. Like Verity, like it or not, it's like, what? How did you dream this? How did you come up with this? So I mean, 2 of my dearest friends got me 4 signed Colleen Hoover books for my birthday. I mean, the obsession is real. She is a dream guest on this show one of these days. I do love her, but I do understand what you mean. And I don't know if we have a sequel to look forward to, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. There's another one of her books being made into a movie too, Reminders of Him.
Oh, see, I haven't read that one.
Yeah, that's my understanding at least. So I don't know. But anyway, Taly, thank you so much for coming on. Taly Thiessen is an attorney in Houston, Texas. If you want to find out more about her, you can visit the TexasTrialAttorneys.com. Did I get that right?
Yep, TexasTrialAttorney.com.
Okay, and tell us your Instagram handle.
Taly Thiessen.
Amazing. Taly Thiessen, I'll tag you. And thank you again for coming on. Thank you all for listening. I will leave all relevant links in the show notes, and I look forward to joining you again next time.